Hey everyone, Sylvie here. I decided to take a little bit of a break from the cases and do a couple of videos on some of the other topics that I wanted to start talking about on my channel. I had done a poll a couple of weeks ago and asked everybody if they wanted to hear about precognitive dreams, lucid dreams, or reincarnation, or all of the above, and the results were overwhelmingly all of the above. I figured I would just start with the dream topics and then I will work my way through the rest. I do apologize if I'm sounding a bit raspy again. I am sick again. I know it probably seems like I have the worst immune system on the planet, but in all actuality, it is my granddaughter's first year of school, and I swear that we would be better off if we just dipped her in a petri dish every day, because everyone has pretty much just been sick on a constant rotation since she started school. Anyway, please excuse the raspiness and let's just go ahead and jump right into this topic. So initially, I had only planned on talking about precognitive dreams and lucid dreaming. But then the more that I thought about it, the more that I realized that this is actually something that I could probably talk about in a certain amount of fair detail. So I'm not really sure how this video is going to go. I might actually break it apart into two parts because I don't want any one particular video to be too crazy long. I don't know how anybody else feels about that, but I have a difficult time watching videos when they're, an hour, half, whatever, too long. So anyway, we'll see how it goes, and then if it starts to drag on a little bit too long, then I might break it apart in two halves. So this video is going to be about the dream state in general, just all of the various aspects of things that can occur when you're in the dream state. And by the dream state, I mean basically that you've gotten yourself into complete relaxation, you've managed to achieve REM sleep, and this is when most dreams usually occur. Okay, now as far as the various different things that can occur in the dream state, we have recurring dreams, we have precognitive dreams, and we have lucid dreams. I am not saying that these are the only things that can occur during the dream state, but these are the things that I'm mostly going to be discussing. So first I'm going to talk about reoccurring dreams. And the reason that I want to talk about this is because I've mentioned in several of my videos that these weird things, these strange instances in my life have been happening to me for as long as I can remember. And that's another thing too, is that I have very vivid memories of my early childhood. And by early childhood, I mean very early childhood. And that's actually a topic for another video, but this all kind of ties together. So I'll try not to get too far off track, but I might mention a couple of things about like my childhood memories and stuff like that. But this particular topic of reoccurring dreams, that is something that started very early on for me. I was born in a small town in Missouri. It was near St. Louis. It was called Barnhart, Missouri. Yes, it's a real town, I swear. It still exists. It's vastly different than it was when I lived there. Technically I was born in St. Louis, but we lived in Barnhart. And we lived there until I was 5, almost 6. And then we moved to Northern Illinois. Now, I've mentioned before that I'm 46 years old. And one of the things that's kind of crazy to me is that I remember that first house that we lived in like we lived there yesterday. I swear, you guys, I can see every detail of that house as if I had just walked into it yesterday. So, and like I said, we moved out of there when I was just a little over 5. So I'm not going to describe the whole house to you. That's something that I'll probably do in another video, maybe about memory or something of that nature. But anyway, I do want to tell you just a little part just to give you some context. So it was a 2-story house, and basically you would walk into the front door. There was a kitchen off to the left, and then there was a living room off to the right. Not small, but not super big either. Off of the living room, there were immediately some stairs that went up to the second floor. At the top of the stairs, if you went to the left, that was my parents' bedroom. Straight in front of the stairs was the bathroom. If you walk down the hall just a little bit to the right, there was a room on the right, which was my brother's. And then room at the very end of the hall was my room. My room was wider than it was long. I don't know if that makes sense, but it was like kind of like across the back of the house. So it was wider than it was long. And you would walk in, and immediately to your right was my closet. And then against the wall on to your left was my bed. And I know that a lot of kids switch from a crib to a toddler bed to a twin size bed or something like that. But I was born in 1976. I don't know if they even had toddler beds back then. And I did not do that. I went from a crib to a twin size bed. So my bed was long ways against the wall right there to the left. Since my room was longer than it was wide, it had 2 windows. So they were, relatively evenly spaced apart, and they were on the opposite wall of my bed. And then right next to my bed, on the wall that would have been the end of the room, I had a dresser, and then I had some little shelves and stuff like that that sat on the floor throughout my room. And then I had a shelf that wrapped all the way around the ceiling of my room. So, the shelf went around the entire room, except for over the closet. My room was painted light blue, and my mother had painted clouds onto the wall. So it was supposed to make me feel like I was in the clouds. It was actually kind of cool, to be honest. So anyway, when I was only probably 4 years old, I started having this reoccurring dream. And in the dream, I would be sleeping, I would wake up, and I would sit up on my bed. And I had these white, kind of like lacy looking curtains over my windows. My windows would be open, and the wind would be blowing really, really hard through my windows. So my curtains would be like wafting out, kind of blowing out towards me. So I would be sitting there on my bed, and I would know that something weird was going to happen because this wind would start blowing hard through my open windows. Well, all of a sudden, this ball of fire, just this enormous ball of fire that took up almost the entire floor of my room, would explode, just blast up through the floor of my room. And it would turn into this huge raging flame that would just go from the floor to the ceiling. And it wasn't creating a hole in the floor. It would just bust up through the floor as if the floor wasn't there, but like I said, no hole. And then it would just burn, it would just burn. In the middle of the flames would appear this face. This is kind of disturbing, you guys, because I was 4-year-old little kid. But it was this face, and I don't really know how to describe it other than it was like a demon or like a devil face. It was red, it had horns, it had dark black eyebrows and things like that. And it just, when I used to try to tell my parents about it, I always described it as a devil. So basically what would happen in this dream is that this devil, or whatever you want to call it, would start talking to me. And it would start saying all these terrible things to me about how bad of a person I was and things like that. And inevitably, I would start crying. And now this is all still in my dream. Okay, this is a dream. I would start crying. I would lay down on the bed. I would bury my face. And then eventually I would just wake up. I would usually wake up crying. I would wake up screaming. My parents had absolutely no idea what to do. I had this dream once for whatever reason, and then after that, I started having it every single night. It was the exact same dream every single night. It did the exact same thing. It said the exact same things to me. Everything in this dream would play out exactly the same every single night. Now, part of the reason that I remember this so well is because it was pretty traumatic. This went on for a month. And there would be, maybe every once in a while, there would be one night when I wouldn't have the dream. But the majority of the time, I would have this dream every single night. My parents always tried to just tell me that it's just a dream, it's just a bad dream, it can't hurt you. Everything's going to be okay, you know, blah, 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 whatever. They weren't the type of parents who would let me come and sleep with them. I was maybe every once in a great while, but the majority of the time I had to stay in my own room. So, you know, I don't know that they really took it that seriously. I don't know that they really understood how much it was affecting me, but they basically weren't doing anything to help me. So, and I know it seems crazy that I could remember all this stuff being 4 years old, but I promise you guys, this is how I remember this. And like I said, you know, it was fairly traumatic, and it isn't uncommon for people to remember traumatic events. So anyway, I specifically remember that one night I was scared. You know, I was scared to go to sleep all the time. So one night I had decided that I was going to have to fix this myself, because either my parents didn't believe me, or they didn't know what to do, or whatever the case was. So when I went to lay down for bed that night, I got my favorite stuffed bunny, and I hugged her really tight, and I closed my eyes, and I just kept saying to myself, I'm not afraid of you, leave me alone. I'm not afraid of you, leave me alone. I just kept saying that to myself over and over and over, until finally I fell asleep. Well, that night, I had that dream again, and it played out in exactly the same way. You know, I woke up, the wind started blowing hard, and I knew that the fireball was going to come up through my floor soon, right? So it did, and I sat there and I watched it, and the face appeared in the flames, and it started talking to me. And as soon as it started talking to me in my dream, I just started screaming, I hate you. I'm not afraid of you. Leave me alone. And I was like, in my dream, I was like screaming at the top of my lungs, you know, over and over and over again. I hate you. I'm not afraid of you. Leave me alone. And after just a couple of minutes, the face like disappeared. And then the fire that it was inside, it just kind of poofed. Just like, I don't know how else to explain it. Just poof. And then all of a sudden, all these like little golden sparkles just kind of fell to the floor. And I was still dreaming. I had not woken up at that point. And I just kind of sat there in my dream, and I was just kind of like, wow. You know, I couldn't believe that had just happened. Well, the really crazy thing about it to me is that I didn't actually wake up that night. I actually slept through the night. And I remember that because the next morning I woke up and my parents were just so ecstatic that I had slept through the night for the first time in like a month. I hadn't woke up terrified. I hadn't woken up screaming. You know, I actually managed to sleep through to the morning, and I just came downstairs in my pajamas the next morning, and my mom and dad were eating breakfast. So at that point, that was it. I never had that dream again. When I think back on it, the whole thing does seem really crazy, but once again, you know, I remember it like it was yesterday. And that wasn't my last reoccurring dream. I did have other reoccurring dreams throughout my life. I've not really so much since I've been an adult, but mostly when I was younger. I had this one weird dream where this evil medieval knight would bust out of a pantry on this horrifying looking horse, and it would chase after me. And I had another weird one about a 3-headed alien, and these dreams were the same thing. They were reoccurring dreams, but both of those dreams only lasted for about a week. And with those dreams, I didn't even talk to my parents about those dreams. I just figured out how to resolve those on my own. With the night dream, all I had to do was I had to take this sword down off the wall, and I had to threaten him with it. And once again, I had to tell him that I wasn't afraid. I wasn't afraid of him. And I don't want to get too much into the alien dream, because if I tell you the extent of all of these dreams, it's going to be a crazy long video. But anyway, basically what it was with the alien, it was a 3-headed blue alien, and its faces were grotesque. And this was after we had moved to Northern Illinois, so this was when I was like 9. But basically what would happen is the alien would come in through the window of my bedroom, and it would stand next to my bed and it would just scare the crap out of me. So finally, and this is super weird, you guys. I mean, I know everything I talk about is weird, but this is super weird. I don't even know how I figured it out, but one night when I had the dream, I was like, okay, I'm not going to have this dream anymore before I went to bed. And then during the dream, not monster, it was an alien. It came in and it was starting to try to scare me. And instead, I just said, I'm not afraid of you. And I think you're sad. And then I gave it a kiss on the top of each one of its ugly, gross heads, like on its foreheads. And when I know it's weird. And then when I did that, it just went away. It smiled at me and its faces weren't gross anymore. And then it just went out my window. And then it was over, and then I never had that dream again. So I know that a lot of people like to interpret dreams and tell you what your dreams mean and things like that. I mean, obviously all of these reoccurring dreams had to do with fear. You know, I was a very fearful child, and the reason that I was fearful is because my parents were not the most attentive people. They kind of left me to my own devices at a very early age. So I didn't have a lot of security. I didn't have a lot of time when I felt really safe. And I also didn't have a very good relationship with either one of my parents. So I always felt like I was kind of on my own. I learned to cook and do my own laundry when I was 8. So, if that gives you kind of a sense of me really being on my own. So I have to assume that those reoccurring dreams were manifestations of my fears. I think that I was afraid that I couldn't take care of myself, even though I had basically proven the opposite my whole life up to that point. Anyway, so the reason that I wanted to tell you guys about the reoccurring dreams is because once I had that first reoccurring dream when I was 4, that opened up a whole new crazy dream state for me. So I pretty much started having lucid dreams like almost immediately after that. I might have actually even had lucid dreams before that, but I don't remember that for sure when I was 4. But I can tell you that after that first dream, that first reoccurring dream, all of my dreams became lucid after that. And if you don't know what lucid dreaming is, please go out and do a little bit of research about that, because I'm really just going to give you the basics of it here. Essentially what lucid dreaming is, in your dream state, in your actual dreams, your dreams become a little bit more real, if you will. You have the ability of all of your senses. So obviously in dreams you can see and you can hear, usually. But most people don't have dreams where they can particularly smell, or, their sense of smell at least isn't strong. They don't really feel, like, sense of touch. And, a lot of the time you don't really have your sense of taste, because if you don't have your sense of taste, if you don't have your sense of smell, you don't have your sense of taste. This is actually something to do with the physiology of the human body. Your brain is supposed to disconnect your senses from your dream state because, you're not supposed to be running around and jumping and interacting and talking and, kicking and punching and doing whatever the heck weird stuff you're doing in your dreams in reality. So your brain will actually kind of shut some of your senses off during the dream state so that you're not actually acting out your dreams, physically while you're seeing these things in your sleep. But with lucid dreaming, you do have those things. And for me, it's almost exactly the same as it is when I'm awake. All of my senses are 100% intact. Now, as a child, I didn't know that there was anything strange about this at all. I thought that was how everyone dreamt. But once I started talking to other people, to my friends and stuff like that, does this happen in your dream? Does that happen in your dream? Can you smell things? Can you feel yourself touching things? Can you feel people touching you? Most of the time people would tell me, no, I don't get any of that. So as I got older, I started to realize that this isn't how most people dream. Now, I'm not saying that every single dream that I've had since I was 4 years old has been a lucid dream. Every once in a while, I do just get a regular, mundane, I can hear, I can see, but I can't smell, feel, taste, any of that kind of stuff in the dream. But the majority of the time, especially if I'm in a deep sleep, I am able to have all of those senses. Now, for me, lucid dreaming just happened. It just started. And I didn't have to try in any way whatsoever to actually make that happen. But you can get yourself to the point where you can purposely lucid dream. That is definitely a thing. And I have to tell you guys, it is cool. Like, it is cool. Sometimes it's scary. Like, one time I had this dream where I was in this house, this weird house, and it was like the zombie apocalypse or something like that, because there were zombies everywhere. And I had to get my way out of this house. And I did manage to bust my way out of this house. But on my way out, a zombie grabbed my arm, like tried to grab my arm, but it didn't get a hold of me. It just kind of touched the edge of my arm. And I could feel that. I could feel it grab my arm. And then I ran out of the house and I went to this, it was like a church or something like that, because it had what looked like a big bell tower. And I got inside of there and I started climbing up into this bell tower. And for some reason, I guess this dream was zombies and vampires. I don't know, it was bizarre. But anyway, so then I'm climbing up this thing and I'm kind of putting my feet on one side and putting my hands on the other side and kind of like cat crawling up this tower. And I only get a few feet up before this vampire thing or whatever it is busts in through the bottom of it. And it was reaching its hand up towards me. And I, kind of just my back was hanging down there because I was trying to shimmy up the tower. And this monster had really, really, really long nails. And it was scratching. It was like trying to reach me and it was scratching at me. And I could feel that. I could feel its nails on my back. And stuff like that is terrifying, because if you don't have control to the full extent of the dream, then your brain just kind of takes off with that dream, but you can still feel those things. So it starts feeling very real and it actually gets kind of scary. But 90% of the time, my dreams are not like that. They're not these horrible monster zombie dreams or whatever. That only happens every once in a while. So anyway, though, the longer that I had lucid dreams, and I still do to this day, the longer that I had them, the more I started to be able to actually control the dreams themselves. So lucid dreaming is not just having your senses fully functional in the dream. Lucid dreaming is also being able to become aware that you are dreaming and being able to control that dream to a certain extent. So, maybe you're in the middle of a dream and it's just playing out, and then all of a sudden something clicks and you realize that you're dreaming. So then at that point, when you would have said, ordinarily you would have said something else in the dream, maybe, you can consciously make the decision to say something else or do something else. Or if something is happening in your dream that you don't like, you can be like, no, I don't want this to happen, and you can stop it or change it. And that started happening to me a fair amount, where this was probably when I was like, I don't know, by the time I was like maybe in my 20s, I was having that happen a fair amount. So I was getting to the point where I could recognize that I was in the dream state and I could start to have some control over it. Well, then by the time I was in my early 30s, I actually started to get a really good grasp of understanding the difference between my reality and being in the dream state. Like, I could almost always recognize when I was in the dream state. So I was getting to a point where I could, on a fairly regular basis, I could take control of my dreams. Well, then one night when I was 31 years old, this crazy thing happened in my lucid dream, and it actually changed everything about my dream state at that point. The way that I was able to view it, and the way that I was able to distinguish my dreams from reality. So in this dream, I was driving down like a road that was going through the middle of a woods. So it was basically a narrow road with all these trees and bushes and foliage on either side. And it was one of these situations where the vehicle was barely fitting down the road. Okay, there every once in a while the branches of the trees were scraping on the car, and I was driving a green, older style Jeep Cherokee. And I do not know why that's the vehicle I was driving. I've never owned one of those vehicles, but that's what I was driving. So it was like, it's kind of like the boxy style, older style Jeep Cherokee. So it's like a boxy SUV kind of thing, right? So anyway, I'm driving down this road through the woods. One strange thing about it was that my mother was in the passenger seat. And I told you, I don't have a good relationship with my parents, so it was a little bit weird for me to be dreaming about my mother. We hadn't spoken to each other in quite some time at that point. But anyway, so my mother was in the passenger seat and my children were in the back seat. And my children were actually teenagers at this point, by the time I was 31. But in my dream, they were little. They were like 7, 8 years old, something like that. Okay. So the four of us are driving down this road, and all of a sudden we come to a fork in the road, and in the middle of the fork, the thing that makes the fork is this gigantic old gnarly looking tree. Now, up until that point, I had just been driving down the road just fine, and nothing, terrible was happening. But as soon as I saw that big old gnarly tree in the fork of the road, all of a sudden I lost control of the vehicle and it just started speeding. Like the accelerator pushed itself down and it just started speeding towards this tree. And within a matter of seconds, the car smashed into the tree and it just folded up like an accordion. All of a sudden, I was standing outside the car. Only I didn't feel like I was standing outside the car. I felt like I was like a ghost outside the car. And I'm basically watching it slam into the tree and fold up like an accordion with me, my mother, and my children inside the vehicle. Obviously, this was traumatic. And in that moment, in my dream, I screamed no. Just screamed at the top of my lungs. And I'm not kidding you guys. My dream paused. It stopped. Everything around me was like on pause. And I was just standing there looking around. So I realized, obviously, that I was dreaming. And so I thought to myself, back it up. And as soon as I thought that, my dream started to rewind. And I'm definitely showing my age by using this reference, but it's the only thing that I can think of to compare it to. It's kind of like, if you're anywhere around my age, or if you've had the pleasure of watching an old VHS tape, it's like when you have the tape into the VCR and instead of stopping the tape, you rewind the tape. So it gets this kind of thing where it rewinds and there's static and you can watch the frames backing up. Well, that's what it was like in my dream. It literally rewound itself. So I rewound the dream to the point where the car was about maybe 5 feet from crashing into the tree. And then I stopped it. I paused it again. So I sat there and I thought about it for a second, like, what should I do? And it kind of just instantly came to me. So I thought to myself, play. And when the image started moving again, now obviously this is not something you'd be able to do in the real world, but in your dreams, sometimes you can do strange things and it's almost like you have superpowers, right? So anyway, I said play, and as soon as the vehicle started to move, I reached in through the back window. That it was there, by the way. The window was there. It wasn't rolled down or anything like that. I don't know if you could even roll those windows down. But anyway, the window was there, but somehow I reached through the window and I grabbed both of my children with one hand and I grabbed my mother with the other hand, and I literally yanked them out of the back window of this vehicle. And this all happened so quickly that basically I grabbed them and I yanked them out of the vehicle just a matter of mere seconds before it crashed into the tree again and folded itself up like an accordion. But at that point, my children and my mother were standing there on the road beside me because I had pulled them out of the car. So at that point in the dream, I just hugged my kids so hard, and my mom just kind of stood there and watched the whole thing, which was weird in and of itself. But anyway, and then that was pretty much it. That was the end of the dream. And I don't remember if I actually woke up from that dream or if it just broke off and I ended up having another dream. But that was how the dream ended. After I had that happen in my dream, and I realized the amount of control that I could actually have over my dream state, the whole situation just changed for me. I think I've mentioned on a couple of occasions that I have also had precognitive dreams my whole life. And if you don't know what precognitive dreams are, basically it's kind of like a dream state deja vu. Deja vu, of course, is when you experience something that you feel like you've experienced before, even though you've never done that thing. Well, I call it like a dream state deja vu because it basically what happens is you'll dream something, and it's usually something relatively mundane, like an everyday conversation or an everyday activity or something like that. But you'll dream about it, and then eventually in your reality, during your waking hours, you will see that event play out in reality. So maybe you'll dream that you're sitting at Starbucks and you're having a coffee and you're having a nice conversation with your friends, and it's just, relatively everyday stuff. But then all of a sudden, a couple weeks later, you'll actually be sitting at Starbucks having a coffee, having a nice conversation with your friends, and something that someone says will spark a memory. And you'll be like, oh, I dreamt this, and then you'll realize that it's exactly the same thing that you dreamt. So essentially what's happening is that you're having a dream of an actual event that hasn't happened yet. So for the longest time, I didn't even realize that I was having precognitive dreams because it was before I, really had been able to take kind of control of my dream state or had really started to fully understand the dream state. So I would realize that I had seen this thing before, but I wasn't 100% certain where or why. So I wasn't initially making that connection, that it was a dream, that I had had a dream about this situation. And there's no set period of time that it takes for the actual event to play out in your real life. So you might have a dream, you might have a precognitive dream, and it might play out a week later. Or you might have a precognitive dream and it might not play out for years. And my best example of that would be when I was roughly 10 years old, I had this dream that I was a teenager. I was an older teenager, like 16, 17 years old. And I was standing in a hallway and I was talking to these two other girls, and there were a bunch of other kids around me, and there were some windows to my left, and I had no idea what this dream had anything to do with. I obviously I could recognize that it was myself at an older age, but I didn't have any context to the dream or anything like that. And like I said, this was when I was like 10. Well, then when I was in fact 16 years old, I had that exact same situation play out. And what it ended up being was I was in high school, and there had been, I don't remember exactly what had happened in school. There had been some kind of a threat, some kind of a scare. It wasn't a fire, because if it was a fire, they would have made us go outside. But for some reason, all of the kids were congregated in this like common area. So some of us were standing by this hallway and everything, and we were basically waiting to be let back into our classes. And like I said, I cannot for the life of me remember what the actual problem was. But anyway, though, it flashed in my head, when this was actually playing out, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is that dream that I had when I was a little girl. So that was the first time that I had realized that my dreams were where these feelings of deja vu was coming from. So I don't know what happens when other people experience deja vu. Maybe they feel differently about it. Maybe they feel like they really did live it out or something like that. But I never really made that connection. I never really understood why I was always having these situations where I felt like I had been there before. So once I made that connection and I realized, oh, I'm dreaming it, it's coming to me in dreams, then things started to become just a little bit clearer for me. And like I said, I didn't, have everything figured out when I was a teenager. It was definitely a decades-long progression. So it's basically, things started happening in my early childhood, and then as my life progressed, I was able to realize that these things were happening, and I was able to connect the dots a little bit and kind of put it together and figure out what was actually going on. So like I said, though, it wasn't until I had that crazy dream that I was able to pause and rewind when I was 31. So this kind of shows you guys how long of a period of time it was. I first realized that my precognitive dreams were what were causing my quote-unquote deja vus when I was like 16. And then this dream where I was able to pause and rewind did not happen until I was 31. So that's a lot of learning. After that, I got to the point where I was able to start telling the difference between a lucid dream and a precognitive dream. And this was something that literally changed my life, you guys. It literally opened up a whole new world of possibilities to me, because now I had gotten to the point where not only could I control my dreams to a certain extent, but I also started to realize the difference between just a regular lucid dream and a precognitive dream. A dream that was something that was going to play out in my reality at some point. And the way that I was able to know the difference is because even though the surroundings don't necessarily look different, to me, they did. Because in my lucid dreams, it was always just kind of I don't know, even though I had control over the dream to a certain extent, it was just kind of this like hazy, dreamy state. I don't really know how else to explain that. Not that it was hazy to the point where I couldn't see. I'm talking about hazy in reference to like my feelings of it, like my connection to it. Whereas when I was having a precognitive dream, it felt a lot more real. It was clearer, and I actually felt like I was in the situation. So it would get to a point where I would have to stop for a minute and I'd have to be like, wait, am I dreaming? Because it felt so real that I wasn't actually 100% sure that I was in the dream state. Okay, so this video is actually getting to be quite long, and I'm realizing now that I can probably do a whole entire another video on precognitive dreams. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to break this one off here at the moment. And this is going to be a 2-part kind of series. Okay, so now don't get discouraged or get upset. I'm not going to wait several days or anything like that to post the second part of the video. I will get that finished up, and then I will post the video, as soon as I can, immediately afterwards though. So I'll post this video tonight, and then I will post the rest of the video tomorrow. First part tonight, second part tomorrow night, kind of a thing. So you won't have to wait a crazy long time for the second half of the video or anything of that nature. But my voice is getting a little bit worn out right now, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. As always, thank you so very much for listening. Bye.